be able to do this. So the specific question of what happens to young persons with mental illness, are they going to school? And more importantly, do the schools know that how to work with a child with mental illness? Do teachers know how to work with children with mental illness? What does the school community know? These are also large and important questions which need to be looked at. I only mention it here because I think organizations like Banyan and several others represented here, with your experience, you are in a much better position to even start raising this issue and in some senses forcing the discussion. Because it needs a lot of attention. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan does say that there are entire allotments within SSA for the education, the schooling of children with disability. But it's, I don't believe it's a particularly successful aspect of SSA. So this is not to say that vocational education or training people for employment or training adult persons to go back and work and seek employment is not important, certainly not. But the root of all our problems is the fact that we don't have a strong and robust school education system which equips people in whatever situation, in whatever condition of health, to be able to lead a productive life. And that certainly falls short something. Well, thank you very much. That's as much as I would like to say for now. Thank you again for asking.
Born Justice Prabha Sridevan, Chairman, Intellectual Property Appellate Board. She'll speak on employment for persons with mental health issues, a rights perspective.
Hope I'll make the Banyan presentation with PowerPoint. I'm terribly disqualified. It is very heartening to hear all that has been said. But having been a judge for 10 years, I see only the problems. I've seen only the problems. Only when there are problems, people come to courts, and that's what I see. And it's not that I want to be a Cassandra casting a pall of gloom, but if all that has been said has actually been put into action, then today's meeting was not necessary at all. And I thought there was a clue in what Dr. Ram Subramaniam said, that if there is leadership, I think the key lies there, especially in India, that somehow the system does not become friendly. It depends on the leaders. And I think ultimately the system should work, whether there are leaders or not. The leaders only give an enhanced impetus. But if the system is an aberration and does not see the disabled and treats them as invisible, which is what I think in one very famous speech Javed Abdi said, that the disabilities people are invisible. If no society can afford to be blind to them. And I think I've shared in this same place a case that came before the Madras High Court, which shows that really we are not that friendly. It was a case where a French national came to India. He lost all his travel papers and he was wandering around, and he wandered from the state of Kerala to the state of Tamil Nadu, and suddenly the powers in Nagarkoil and Kanyakumari district decided there were too many disturbed looking poor people wandering on the streets and they should all be taken in. And they were all, I will use the word rounded up, deliberately rounded up and then produced before a magistrate who issued reception orders in 2 days for 198 people, all certified as mentally ill and sent to the institute. I mean, if the system recognized the individual rights of mentally ill, it would not have happened. The French citizen's daughter filed a writ of habeas corpus, and that's how this sad story came to light. And then we asked the police to find out, and this man who had traveled on his own all the way from wherever in France to Kerala to visit Amritanandamayi Ma was certified as having some kind of a disorder and put in cell. And it's not that somebody who should not otherwise be in an institute of mental health was put inside. I think it's the way the society treats the mentally unwell person as somehow they are non-persons. Somehow as if he or she does not deserve the same respect and dignity that I do. And that's not correct. And what Vandana said, that when training was made en masse, somehow it didn't work. But when training was made individually, it worked, because each of us is a person. And I think therein lies the key somehow for each mentally ill, unwell person or a person otherwise disabled, it doesn't matter, to know that all of us recognize the I that is there. And I think somehow we have failed, and that is why the need for this meeting here. And as far as employment and education, right, which is what I have been asked to talk about, but I will stray quite easily away from it. I found that the following areas could be focused on. One should fill the gaps in access to literacy and employment. One should devise and adopt inclusive methods of recruitment, which means also adoption of disability-sensitive job qualifications. If you provide for job qualifications which clearly exclude the mentally unwell, then there's no point in saying, yes, everybody can come here and be employed. Improve the infrastructure for management of health needs of the disabled. Ensure the participation of the disabled in decision-making process. We also talk about this where child rights are concerned, that the child should have a voice. And similarly, I think here, the persons for whom we are devising projects should have a voice in designing. And I think we are not, we cannot say that you can't decide what you want. In fact, once I visited the Ranchi Institute, and it was part of a sensitization program. And after we came away, the doctor who came with us asked us, did you see anything different? I mean, we came up with a lot of wrong answers. And then we said all of them had short hair. Then he asked, what does that tell you? So we all said it's convenient, they are not mentally well, so it's easier to manage a short hair. And then he asked us, do you see you've taken away their right to decide how they should style their hair? It starts there. I mean, even a three-year-old child, if she is taken to the hairdresser or whatever it's called, knows what they want. And how do we decide how somebody else should style their hair? You just give a crop, a short crop, because it's easy for us to deal with it. So participation in the decision-making process without us thinking that somehow we know better. I think that should be there. And ensure the contribution of the disabled towards the growth of the nation's economy. And now the aspirations of the disabled is also rising high. And I don't think the state or any of us, the society, really matches. I have taken an example of 3 cases which shows how the courts have not dealt with it in the right perspective, and I've chosen the Supreme Court of Ireland, the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of USA. All 3 countries which are supposed to be more disability friendly, to show how it works. And to me, this is wrong, because the state, when I say the state, I mean the judiciary, the executive and legislature, should actually breach the cleavage, should be a mediator between the ones who have and the ones who have not. In any way. It could be disability, it could be poverty, it could be a minority-majority divide. But if the state shall range itself on one side, it shall range itself on the weaker side and not on the stronger. And so it should provide a proactive approach, and it should not say, if there is a law, we'll implement it. But until there is a law, this is how equality will fall. No, we cannot do that. And I will just share with you those three cases. One was the Employment Equality Bill, which came up for consideration by the Irish court. The Act required the employer to bear the cost of all the necessary treatment to the disabled. And this was challenged. And the Irish court said this was unconstitutional because it required the employer, not the society as a whole, to bear the cost of all the necessary treatment. And therefore, the imposition of these costs violated the right to property of the employer. Whereas what is ranged against that is the right to life of the disabled. So the legislature had actually made an act, but the judiciary substituted what it thought was the equality perspective and struck down something that to the general to the disadvantaged members equal to the general population without so that they take advantage of the benefits. And the Canadian Supreme Court uses a very nice word. It says, if a government failed to do it, it is a very thin and impoverished version of equality. I think very often we find this thin and impoverished version of equality. The next is the Board of Trustees of the University of Alabama, which is the US Supreme Court. There, the Supreme Court clearly says, it is not necessary to make special accommodation for the disabled. I quote, thus the 14th Amendment does not require states to make special accommodations for the disabled, so long as their actions towards such individuals are rational. They could quite hard-headedly and perhaps hard-heartedly hold to job qualification requirements which do not make allowance for the disabled. If special accommodations for the disabled are to be required, they have to come from positive law and not through equal protection clause. I think this forgets that substantive equality which is promised by the Constitution. So where there is a gap between the ones who have and the ones who have not, the court and the state must fill in the gap, and that's how substantive equality works. The other is the formal equality, which treats it's like there is a very good example. It's like making I think it comes in the Mandal Commission case. It's like making two runners, one with hands and legs tied to do the running race with the other, and it can never be done. And therefore, those fetters are the various kinds of disability. Even in the Mandal Commission case, the Supreme Court talks of disability which is intellectual or physical disability when it talks of backwardness. So when you say that backwardness has to be addressed, which is social backwardness, economic backwardness, these are issues where the disabilities people, the persons with disabilities, are not equal to the others, and therefore that gap should be filled by the court, and that is a right. And as Vandana said, when rights are taken away, what do you do? And that is why I said that the state should constantly mediate and breach the cleavage. And this is their duty. When there is a right, there is always a corresponding duty. And this is their duty, and this, if we fail, that is the tragedy. In fact, one of the disabilities right activists says that the tragedy is not that I am in a wheelchair. The tragedy is that the attitude and the atmosphere does not recognize my equality. And this is their right, and this the Constitution promises, and this all of us have to respect. I really thank Banyan for allowing me to say a few words.
I know some of you are waiting for tea. We will have the last speaker of our session, Justice Ruma Pal, Supreme Court of India, to retired, I'm sorry, for her concluding remarks.
So I'll come to you just to really sum up what everyone's been saying and to add a few words. But I had said, like Ms. Dina to Vandana, that I could not in fact speak, but then I was prompt to speaking, so just a few words. I think that what we seem to have been talking around using the word mental illness, speaking completely as an outsider, without in fact defining what we mean. I mean, it's not very clear to me as to whether by mental illness you mean disability. Are you talking about curable, incurable, depression, dementia, mental retardation? It's not very clear. And I think part of the problems are due to the fact that we have not, in fact, defined in our minds exactly what we mean by mental illness. Just as Vandana spoke about individualized vocational training and treatment or rehabilitation, it is also very necessary to define in our minds very clearly, because mental health is as wide a term as physical health. I mean, you might be a diabetic, you might be having an ache in your spine, it might be all kinds of things. So you can't just speak about mental illness. I think that the first job that has to be done is that you must clarify in your minds as to what kind of mental illness you are talking about. To a large extent, this attitude is due to the lacuna in the law, where the law has not in fact defined what mental illness is in very specific terms. I'm glad to know that the Mental Health Act of 1987 is in the process of amendment, and hopefully the definition, because very wide definition, they say a mental illness is a person who needs medical treatment for it. It does, apart from anything else, not only not focus the attention of people like you, people in the government, the NGO sector, the lawyers, most importantly judges. It gives them a wide discretion, as Justice Sridevan has said, as to how they define mental illness. It's a very important definition. It defines whether a person is able to contract or not. It defines whether a person is able to hold property or not. It defines whether a person can get a divorce or not, how much alimony they will get. It is the basis of all the rights in the world, and we have not, in fact, defined it. So I would request the NGOs and the government officers who are present here to really concentrate on the definition of mental illness in all the various acts we have, whether it is the Criminal Procedure Code or the Contract Act or the Code of Civil Procedure and so forth. The second aspect is, of course, all of you have said that there has to be a shift from care and custody to actually mainstreaming the persons who are treated as mentally ill, and everyone recognizes that employment gives not only status in the eyes of the world. Someone said the family started respecting that person more when that person started earning, but also gives the person herself a sense of self-worth and confidence. Some of you have spoken about the methods of vocational rehabilitation, individualized rehabilitation, placement and then training. But what has struck me most I come actually in three avatars, if you can call it that. One is my background in the law. The second is as a social activist, because I run a home for the disadvantaged women, and women means from the age of 0 to the day they die. And amongst them, there are a lot of them who suffer from depression, dementia, and I know the problems of accessing psychiatrists. It's an impossibility. We cannot get adequate help. We get it sporadic, and everyone knows that psychiatric help has to be consistent. And I also, in the last capacity of on the Executive Council of a human rights organization called the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which, amongst its various projects, deals with the mentally ill prisoners. Now, under the law, you cannot stand for trial if the court is of the view that you are incapable of making your defense. Now, everyone knows that the legal system takes a long time for a case to be heard. So every time the matter comes up, which may be after the man is in jail or the woman is in jail, it comes up after about 3 or 4 years perhaps, and then who certifies? Who decides? And so there are many people under trials, mentally, or who have been certified as being mentally ill, who have been there for 15 years without having a trial done. So the law needs to be looked at very much. But ultimately, what struck me most about this, and I will conclude with this, is I don't know if this is true about the rest of India, but I was really impressed by the absolute commitment of the government service who are dealing with the issue in Tamil Nadu. It is quite remarkable. I am really very impressed, and the enthusiasm with which they are doing their work. I wish we could replicate it in the rest of India. But, and I'm so glad that Banyan has interacted so very closely with them. And more strength to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you concluded in a very, very heartening and encouraging manner. We'd now quickly break for our first tea break session. About 15 minutes to 20 minutes from now, may I request all of you to join us for a cup of tea or coffee. It's up on the landing. There are also products on display and for sale from Anjali, Kolkata. Ratnaboli has brought them. Then also abandoned products for display. Please join us for tea, and we'll convene here by about 12:05. Nice meeting you. May I please request them to come forward. Dr. Kishore of the Department of Community Psychiatry, NIMHANS, and Dr. Alok Sareen, Consultant Psychiatrist of... Oh, really? Then what is this that we are writing? Very bad. Sitaram Bhartiya Institute, we have been connoting her own departments and positions. I'm sorry about this. I stand to be corrected. Dr. Alok Sareen, please correct me if I've got this right. Consultant Psychiatrist, Sitaram Bhartiya Institute of Science and Research. We welcome our moderators, and I think probably you could be a little more visible, sir. Yeah, maybe on that chair. And I now request Gayatri to make her presentation. Thank you.
can't hear.
Yeah. We start off presentation. Gayatri, we start off. We can have the questions after all the presenters have completed their presentations. May I request Gayatri to speak your presentation?
Technology to come into place. It might be a good time to reiterate a few issues. The two issues that are made are one, the need for understanding, accepting, and placing squarely on the table the absolute sort of non-negotiable space that people with mental illness are like anybody else. They have their same rights, the same entitlements as anybody else. And as came out very clearly in the discussion earlier, it's fair to say that look, the fact that everybody is born with the rights, as Vandana pointed out, is clear. And in many situations, for whatever reason, the rights may not be as fully realized as possible. And employment is certainly one of those. The other interesting point which also emerged in the morning's presentation is something I think all of us need to be aware of, is that so far what we've looked at is that as the recovery happens, employability improves. And this is what the main thrust of intervention has been so far, that if you provide appropriate and adequate intervention, the person will get better, and so therefore will become able to function. The realization of